Now we're going to discuss the topic of alienation, which is a hot topic in custody cases. It seems to be, I don't want to say popular because popular sounds like favorable, but it seems like seems to be one that is used very frequently, or one that rears its ugly head very frequently. And basically, what it is it is when one parent basically actively uh, prevents and or inhibits, and this is just my definition from my experience. You can find the actual legal definition most likely with either within your state statutes or your like case law. So just so you know, there's two main sections to law, and that's the actual statutes and then actual cases that have been decided. Okay. So, but this is just mine. So inhibits, prevents and or inhibits a relationship between the child and the other parent. Okay. And there are so many different specific allegations, specific things that can be, you know, brought up or alleged. You know, sometimes it can get pretty nasty when you're talking about alienation. You know, you'll basically like you know, some of the things that can be used or alleged are you know, basically brainwashing, manipulation. Okay, it's another one. I like to call it talking smack in front of the child. Just active prevention, uh, prevention from communication. You know, some people talk about you know, things like forcing the child to think a certain way. So like forcing the child to be, let's say, in fear, or to feel, you know, a dislike or a hatred, something like that, or guilt, I guess, could be another one. Okay. Now, the reason here's the reason, and this is my opinion based on my professional experiences over the course of, you know, nearly 2 decades. Um, Here's the reason. I guess we could throw up limiting. You know, I don't know what else we could put up there. Yeah, I guess we covered pretty much a lot of them, enough to get into the conversation. But here's the problem. Here's why this is so difficult, and here's why it's so hard for people to understand why this is so difficult. Because most of these here in this list, these things, And there are others too, but this is kind of like the theme of alienation, right? The reason why it's so difficult is because pretty much all of these things, uh, pretty much all of them, are conclusions, right? They're conclusions. They're a matter of interpretation. Okay, makes sense. Matter of perspective. Does that make sense? And when you're dealing with things, anything really, in a custody case, that is a conclusion, that is a matter of perspective, and or a matter of interpretation, you're going to be hard pressed to prove it. Because let's just look at it. Who the hell can say what brainwashing is? Think of like if you take a step back and look at brainwashing, look at manipulation. Talking smack is one that it's not really a conclusion. You can prove that pretty easily, right? But that's not enough for alienation, okay? Because that happens a lot. Prevention from communication isn't really either. But again, that's not you know uh, preventing phone use or FaceTime use alone. That's not alienation. It's horseshit, but it's not alienation. This other stuff though is like kind of like the theme of it, right? So let's look at them and take a step back and look at those exact words and definitions. And the difficulty in proving it is tough because you're never going to get anybody to admit to this, right? The only way you could maybe is through an expert, right? So you would basically have to lay out like as a lay witness. So as the other parent or like with an eyewitness, you would need like to lay out like the actual facts, what they're doing, right? And then argue alienation. Does that make sense? Any questions about this so far? I'm going to continue into, but I'm going to go to the next screen. Yeah, I mean, here's the problem. Here's the problem with alienation is right. Most people may not know that they're even doing it. And the problem is with these cases, there's so much emotion rolled up into these because you got on one hand you got the termination of a romantic relationship, right? So there's hard feelings there. You probably have a another relationship, at least one, maybe both. So there's hard feelings there because then you add in, and it's not in every situation, but then you add in like the jealousy factor, and then you add in like the emotion from the significant other that compounds it. And then you got like I said in one of my other trainings, human beings aren't perfect, parents aren't perfect. So it's like when you screw up or when you make a mistake, which happens all the time, it makes it like it's like a million times worse, right? So then people start to do stupid shit to try to get the other person back, maybe, but they don't realize until you like really take a deep breath and like take a step back and realize that you're actually like using the child, which is just like horse crap. Um, it's like it's almost like, and I know I referred to Tony Robbins in another one, but Tony Robbins does this thing where he explains, and it's so true in custody cases. It's basically like if somebody, say, like on your forearm, if somebody like took a feather, say like a hard like feather, and like rubbed it on your forearm, like you wouldn't really even feel that. It might even like tickle, right? Now let's assume that you have like a gaping open wound on your forearm, and somebody takes that same feather and rubs it on there. Well, it's going to hurt like a bitch, right? And it's the same with this stuff. Like, and I'm not excusing it. I'm not excusing it because it's wrong. I'm just saying like this is why it is so hard to show like one party that's perfectly right and one party that's perfectly wrong. Like if that's the case, you're probably not going to have a trial, right? Because everybody messes up. Everybody makes mistakes as a parent, as a human being, as an ex, like it happens. And then all of that, all of those emotions just aggravate the situation. And then there starts like a back and forth, right? Like the only way you're truly ever not going to have any of that stuff is if one party just doesn't care, right? And they're just like, piss on this. I'm not dealing with this. I'm out. Okay. So you have all of this, all these different facts that you would need that you need to prove in order to prove these conclusions, and then to argue that your interpretation and your perspective are correct, right? So how is that done? Really? Like how do you do that? Well, the only way, in my opinion, and I mean, in every jurisdiction is different, but the only way for sure that you're ever going to prove that is if you do go to a full trial. Okay, you just it's too sensitive. It's there's too much going on to prove it. And listen, I'm not saying that if you have an alienation case, I'm not saying to quit thinking about it, because it's if it's going on, it's bullshit. But I'm just saying you got to be prepared that it's very tough, very, very tough to prove. So you're going to have to go to a trial, right? And in trial, here's the ways that you're going to try to do it, right? So basically, you have your testimony, okay? So things, and again, you have to stick to facts, though. You can't come and say he brainwashes them. That won't fly. Stick to the facts and the evidence, okay? You have any eyewitnesses, right? Right? Again, stick to the facts, not conclusions. You can't just say, oh, he manipulates the children. Tell the court how. He does this. He does this. He did this. He did this. He does this all the time, right? Another way is with experts, okay? Now, here's the thing about experts, okay? If they're a family law, family counseling expert, like psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, um, you can get them to touch on the alienation, right? But first off, you're probably already going to know if they mentioned it, because you'll get like a report, you know? All right. And if they didn't mention it, and you're thinking that maybe they didn't mention it because they just weren't asked about it, or it wasn't like brought to their attention, that's possible. But if you're going to be seeking that in trial, you better damn well know the answer, especially if you're basing your whole case off of that. Because what happens if you get that witness on the stand, that expert witness, and you ask them and you don't know what the answer is going to be, and they go, oh, no, there's no alienation? Then you're effed, right? And the other way is effective cross-examination. Okay. Another one is the children's testimony. Okay. And this could be a big one. This could be a very, very big one. The problem is you can't coach. And I'm not saying any of you are coaching or going to coach or anything like that, but you have to be so careful. So it's basically going to take a child to open up and tell the judge how that parent makes them feel when they do that stuff, or to tell the judge why he hates his mom, you know. And that's a tough thing, because very rarely, you got kids are in fear usually. It depends on the age. You got that, but then you got the risk of coaching, right? If you like help them at all, which if you're doing it the right way, I'm not even saying it's a bad thing because you're just trying to parent, but what you got to be careful of is that it doesn't come out as coaching, because that's usually one of the first things the judge will ask was, did anybody tell you what to say today? You know, that's why anytime you get that chance and they ask you, the kid asks you, just tell the truth. Tell them what's on your mind. Tell the truth. That's it. And that's really it. And it has to be, um, unless it comes from the expert or it comes from the child, as a conclusion. Other than that, it's basically, and with them too, but it's basically like outlining the facts and then making the argument in closing, and then cross your fingers and hope the judge sees it. All right. It's been my experience that with regard to children, that the judge will talk to the children so long as they can, speak somewhat intelligently and comprehend things and know the difference between the truth and a lie. Um, but as far as at what age and what maturity level, that's going to depend on the particular jurisdiction. And usually it's written in there written in the statutes about kids. In my particular jurisdiction in Pennsylvania, there's no age given in particular. It's based on the maturity level of the child and their awareness of their best interest. Okay. So like they could be mature and older, but maybe they want to spend all the time at dad's because dad has really cool parties, or dad doesn't have a bedtime. All right. That's how Pennsylvania is. I would recommend anybody who has a question about that to look at their local rules, and it'll be spelled out in there.